Money Stop Mafia, your boys are back. I would usually call you the Mafia, but really? You're our amigos this week. Look at this guy. Somebody lost a bet. He's Cole. I'm Steven. This is the most important NASCAR betting stop of the day. And not only were we maybe betting with Vegas, with some of the odds makers, but I think Cole placed a bet with the wrong guy. Am I right?
I did. Full transparency, this is actually one of Dad's cowboy hats. I snuck in his room minutes ago and stole it from them. So,
I had a
uh,
feeling
our,
that would be the attire.
yeah. So our bet initially was last week we had Daniel Suarez as a sleeper pick for this week, and full transparency, I make the outlines obviously, so I had him on there for a reason. But after a certain point, there gets to a point where you feel really good about like maybe five drivers, and then there's like a massive drop off. So I had Suarez on there with good stats, but not a whole lot of confidence in case you couldn't tell. Steven had said that he thought that Daniel Suarez would get a top 10. I did not think he would get a top 10. And the bet was if he got a top 10, I'd have to wear a sombrero in honor of Daniel Suarez and his amigos. Not only did Daniel Suarez place top 10, he had a shot at the win, and he finished second as our highest finishing money stop driver from Las Vegas. So kudos to Daniel Suarez. Hats off to him. And yeah, now I'm rocking the sombrero cowboy hat hybrid for this episode.
I'll be honest with you. I made this bet for a reason. I picked him for a top 10. It was a friendly wager where, obviously was confident in him, but by no means did I think he was going to go out there and win this race. And by no means did either of us think that Josh Berry was going to come away with his first career win. This was a fantastic race, one of the most competitive in Las Vegas Motor Speedway history in terms of the lead changes and the competitiveness. We saw two guys, really the whole top five, aside from William Byron, were guys that haven't been in victory lane either ever or in quite some time. So this was an unbelievable race. Josh Berry is the winner. I feel like this is one of those weeks where maybe there's a little bit more to unpack from Vegas in the prior week than there is to preview for Homestead. The last thought I'll say is that this race kind of reconfirmed what you and I talked about a lot last year on this podcast, and that is that this package, this car is made for the 1.5-mile intermediate tracks. Every race we go to, whether it's Atlanta, Homestead like this week, Vegas, doesn't matter. This package and these cars are so damn good on the 1.5-mile intermediates. And, that was the problem for NASCAR for quite some time. And this was, as we said, kind of felt like the real season was beginning at Phoenix with the Mile Oval. I really feel like, this is such a great sign for things to come, especially this week as we go to Homestead, which is arguably the most exciting track on the circuit with this package.
Yeah, had an incredible race in 1.5 miles at Las Vegas and going to, like you said, arguably the best one on the circuit here in Homestead. So, yeah, I really enjoyed this race and I enjoyed being there. It reminded me of like an old school NASCAR race when we first got into the sport when there were no stage breaks because there was a ton of strategy. It was so difficult to just navigate for all the drivers, all the teams. I feel like I have not seen that many pit road penalties in years. You had fuel mileage come into play. You had tires come into play. It was just an all-around awesome race, and I think the parity was also a really encouraging thing as well. Obviously, Josh Berry getting the win was incredible to witness live, and just a great story for the sport. A grassroots racer came up through short track racing, and now he's a winner in the Cup Series and a well-earned victory at that. He was running top 10 all day for a race where there was so much going on, so much peril. He really was a contender from the start to finish. And he worked for it too. I mean, he held off not only Daniel Suarez, but his teammate in Ross Chastain. He held off William Byron. And it was a really good race, I got to say. So I'm really pumped up to leave Vegas and head to Homestead because the racing there, even better. And should be a really fun one.
Yeah, I think you talk about, this package, these cars, where they race best at. I was on the record saying Atlanta is my favorite track in this new configuration on the sport right now. But if it's not, Homestead is definitely up there. It might be a close second. So we're going to head to Homestead this week. First, recapping some of what you breezed over a little bit in the drivers we discussed last week where they finished. We had Daniel Suarez in second, William Byron in fourth, Ross Chastain fifth. We had also top 10s out of Alex Bowman and Kyle Larson, who was my pick for the win. Seabell finished 12th. Joey Logano 15th, and then we had five drivers leading off with John Hunter Nemechek that finished 20th or worse. So this was a race where a lot of things were, like you said, a lot of strategy at play. It was something that I was watching without the sound, so it was a little bit difficult for me to grasp. But hearing your thoughts and obviously hearing some of the storylines made it a little bit easier to follow. But as we go to Homestead, Cole, we're going to figure out our starting lineup 2:15 Eastern time on Saturday. And as we take a look at the pre-qualifying odds, Vegas always seems to have a keen eye on Kyle Larson. So he's the favorite per usual, plus 400. You got Tyler Reddick at plus 550, Ryan Blaney plus 600, and Christopher Bell and William Byron round things out, tied at plus 700. So as we kick off our favorites, Cole, what are you looking at this week?
Well, the obvious one to kick it off with here is going to be Kyle Larson. He has said time and time again, this is one of his favorite tracks. It's one of his best tracks statistically in certain measures, which I'll get to here in a second. But we always think of Kyle Larson when we come to the 1.5-mile tracks, especially Homestead, because he loves ripping that high line. He caters to his dirt background, and it's just something he's very comfortable doing. So he is the obvious favorite for a reason at plus 400. He is the most expensive driver in daily fantasy at $11,000, but for good reason. He finished 9th at Vegas, which marked his only his second quality finish of the season. Third quality finish of the season. His other two finishes were third place, and he had another top 3 car in this race at Las Vegas. So still got lots of speed, lots of momentum coming into this one at Homestead. And I think another really important thing to note here is that Kyle Larson is running triple duty this weekend between Trucks, Xfinity, and Cup. And what's really interesting to me is that, you look at these race winner lines when they open up every single week, it's always above even payout. Well, that's not the case for Xfinity and Trucks. Kyle Larson is minus 115 in Xfinity and minus 120 in Trucks. But what's really cool about him racing in these different series is that you can parlay him to win in all 3. And I think that's a really interesting bet to make, an interesting parlay to make, because he has the speed to do it, he has the equipment to do it, and he has all the tools needed to get it done there 3 times here this weekend. It's only been done once before with Kyle Busch on a few occasions at Bristol, and I think that Kyle Larson is very capable of doing that once again. So if you were to parlay him to win all 3 of those races on BetMGM, plus 1,613, which you throw $10 on that, you get 171 and change back. So even something as small as $10, $5, it's going to be a really big payday, and it's not something that's impossible for someone like Kyle Larson. So keep an eye on that parlay for this weekend as a little bonus for the money stop. But Kyle Larson, again, one of his favorite tracks, one of his best tracks. He won here in 2022, the first race of the next-gen car, and he has over 600 laps led in 11 starts. That is more than anybody in the series. And he has raced not nearly as long as guys like Kyle Busch, Joey Logano, and Brad Keselowski. So that speaks volumes. That's the good. The bad-ish part is that he has a 13th place average finish, which is where he placed last year. And the reason for that is because this is a track where Kyle Larson's going to be quick. He's going to rip in that high line, and that can sometimes burn him here. And that's made evidenced by top 10s and only five starts, so under 50% top 10 rate here at Homestead. So with that in mind, there's a little bit of a risk to go along with Kyle Larson in the sense that, well, I guess for any race you can go to, really, you could say the same exact thing. He's going to have top 5 speed, race winning speed, but it's a matter of just not pushing it too much. So Kyle Larson, obvious favorite for all the reasons I just mentioned there, but another guy that has a really great chance, in my opinion, is going to be Tyler Reddick, who is plus 550 for the race win and $10,700 for DFS. And he might even be a better value than Kyle Larson, in my opinion, because he is a very eerily similar driver from profile sense. Look at this year, for example. He has 2 quality finishes, both of them being top 5s. However, he's had top 5 pace the last couple weeks before running into trouble where he finished 20th or worse. So I think when you look at that, he has a bit of a higher floor than Kyle Larson, because Kyle Larson will often, get involved in wrecks and whatnot. So I think that's a more of a pro for Tyler Reddick. And you also take into account that he is the reigning race winner here at Homestead. He's a 2-time Xfinity Series winner here. And just speaking to him at Vegas, I asked him what it's like ripping the high line at Homestead. He said there are very little feelings in motorsports and in racing than when you can perfectly execute ripping the high line at Homestead. He said it feels like home is what he called it. So I found that to be really telling
Great quote.
in terms of his comfortability level racing at Homestead. And as opposed to Kyle Larson, who's kind of had a mixed bag of results here, he does have a good amount of laps led, which is good for daily fantasy. But finishing it off, Tyler Reddick's had his number top 5 in 4 of 5 Cup Series starts there. So for that, I think he has a higher floor than Kyle Larson. He's a better value for daily fantasy than him as well. So 2 really good racers at these style tracks, ripping that high line. Give me Kyle Larson, give me Tyler Reddick.
Yeah, I mean, you can't go wrong with those 2 picks. You pick the 2 guys that, again, this track it caters perfectly to their driving style. I say it every week, and I'm going to take the low-hanging fruit. If you're going to pick 2 guys that are fit for this track and taming it, I'm going to take the 2 guys that have been head and shoulders the best in the sport this season, that have been favorites, I think, every week now. Still Christopher Bell and William Byron. They're both, tied for 4th in odds at plus 700. Daily fantasy-wise, William Byron, $300 more expensive, so kind of pick your poison. But I'll start there with Willie B. He is one of 2 drivers to now finish top 10 in all but 1 race this season. Winner at Homestead back in 2021. And you talk about a high floor. How about 12th or better in his last 5 starts here with an average finish of 6.8 over that span, including 6th last year. And obviously, he's been probably the most consistent driver all season long, along with Tyler Reddick and Christopher Bell, who, for Christopher Bell, of course, wasn't able to complete the 4 straight wins, finished 12th. It was definitely an underwhelming day for C-Bell. And obviously, you're going to, see that him and that team want to, take things right back to the top and do what they do best. And a former winner at Homestead in his own right, 2023, finished 4th last year. And he has the best average finish in 5 starts at Homestead of 8.8. So C-Bell, William Byron, rack them up every week, make them favorites until they prove us otherwise. And listen, a 12th place finish is not going to keep Christopher Bell out of our favorites category. These are the 2 drivers right now that are at the pinnacle of the sport. And by all means, they are, head and shoulders above the rest at this point.
Yeah, and I think the favorites for this week are really cut and dry. I would be very surprised if one of those 4 drivers did not end up winning this weekend. And if, at least 3 of 4 of them didn't place inside the top 5. So you're looking at wins from these guys. I think they're self-explanatory from that sense. But looking at sleepers here, it's going to get a little bit more bold on my end, at least. Sleepers are drivers that have an outside chance at winning. They're usually really good values for daily fantasy. And I've got 2 drivers here that, I guess one, he's at a really good 2025 so far, but not as great a resume at Homestead. And the other one has had a great resume at Homestead, but not a great 2025. So I'll kick it off with that driver. It's going to be Denny Hamlin. Denny Hamlin plus $1,100 for the race win and $9,700 in daily fantasy. At this point, I believe it is fair to call Denny Hamlin a sleeper because you look at what he's done so far this season. Pair of top 10s. Outside of that, 3 finishes worse than 21st, including last week at Las Vegas. And I'll be honest, there hasn't been a ton of promise for me from this camp. I think they're still kind of getting their bearings together, both him and Chris Gale as his new crew chief for this year. So despite that, he's still a 3-time winner at Miami, last coming in 2020. And he is one of 2 drivers with the most experience at this track, 20 starts at that, with a 65% top 10 rate and a 10.5 average finish, also finishing 3rd in this race last year. So I think there's some reason for optimism with Denny Hamlin. I'm not going to go out there and bet him for the race win, but I'm considering him for daily fantasy for sure with that $9,700 for sure. And then for the guy that's done really well this season and has really flown under the radar unjustly, in my opinion, has been Alex Bowman. Alex Bowman, my sleeper last week, actually, plus $2,200 for the race win and a nice $8,600 for daily fantasy. The 2 best drivers in the sport, as you mentioned, Christopher Bell, William Byron. 3rd best statistically, Alex Bowman. He has the 3rd best average finish in the series at 11.8. He is 5th in points, and the only other driver with top 10s in 4 races this season is Alex Bowman, along with William Byron. So I think he's been criminally underrated his entire career, but especially this season. You look at how he's been able to get these finishes. In 4 starts, he's had to rally from 34th or worse to get those top 10s, which has been really impressive to me. I think him and Blake Harris have a great rapport. And again, just want to circle back to what I mentioned before about his Homestead resume. Not the best, only 3 top 10s and 9 starts. However, he scored his career best finish in his last start there of 7th. So there's reason for optimism for Alex Bowman and playing into the momentum factor and how he's looked this season. And, not even just this season, but like going back to the last half of last year, he won at Chicago. From there, he was one of the best drivers in the postseason before that disqualification at the Roval. So he's had speed, honestly, going back to the last half of last season and into this season. So there is no reason to believe that he will not get another top 10 finish here at Homestead. And oh, by the way, HMS Hendrick Motorsports, back-to-back weeks where all 4 cars finished inside the top 10. So that stable's been really quick as expected this year.
Yeah, and that's a great segue into my first sleeper and another guy that's been rock solid consistent this year in Chase Elliott, coming off another top 10, of course, last week, which was his third. And he has an 11.8 average finish this year, which is 4th best in the sport, very quietly, because let's face it, this is very similar to what we saw last year out of Chase Elliott. He's not really contending for wins, but he's been really, really consistent, a high floor driver every single week, which is, very un-Chase Elliott of him compared to what you would have probably thought and expected earlier in his career. But this is a guy that hasn't won yet at Homestead. He did finish runner-up here the season that he won the championship in 2020. Last year finished 5th with 81 laps led and a 9.8 average finish in 11 starts overall at Homestead. So he has an average inside the top 10 at Homestead. He has the 4th best average finish in the Cup Series this year. You talk about Hendrick Motorsports and their consistency, the high floor. Chase Elliott's kind of the example of that. Similar to what you said about Denny Hamlin, I don't know that I'd pick him for the win just because there's so many other drivers that have been very consistently up there that we've already talked about during this hour. But Chase Elliott, a guy that certainly on my radar, especially DFS at 9,500, feels like a high floor pick depending on where he qualifies. And plus 1,600 for the race win is very solid, and it ties him with the next driver I will discuss, and that is the reigning champion, Joey Logano, who is 9,200 in daily fantasy. And he's had some really solid speed this year, which obviously, listen, it feels like the last couple of years, the speed has really come on late for that 22 team. But the fact that they have it early should probably make you feel pretty encouraged. But no top 10s somehow. Vegas marked his third top 15 and his best finish of 12th. So still has the most laps led this year. So it's been kind of a weird season for Joey where the speed has been there, the laps led have been there, but the finishes have not been there. So you got to figure the law of averages and will balance out at some point for him. He's led 40 or more laps in 4 out of the 5 races. So especially in terms of DFS, that piques my interest. And you're looking for a guy that's going to set a lot of fast laps, lead a lot of laps, and get you fantasy points in that regard. And listen, I really believe that the finishes will start to come for Joey Logano. Patience is key. Won here in 2018. His best next-gen finish at this track, though, is 8th, and he finished 28th here last year, 18th in 2022. So it's not exactly the glowing stats you'd expect or hope for out of somebody that's in our sleepers category, but he's also got, a ton of laps logged at this track. 16 starts, an average finish of 15.4. You're just looking at another guy, for me, that has been so solid this year, along with Chase Elliott. 2 guys that the finishing results have not necessarily been top 5s, runner-ups, top 3s, but they've been strong enough and shown enough speed to where I think they can definitely go out there and contend for the win. And, you mentioned before that you think that the winner will definitely come from those 4 favorites that we mentioned. And I think by and large that makes a lot of sense. But looking at how competitive last week's race was, I have a feeling we're going to see a lot of different players, a lot of comers and goers. And I think that if it's, say that those 4 drivers we discussed from the top, Larson, Reddick, and then Christopher Bell and William Byron, say they're the 4 best cars, I think that there's going to be an element of strategy, an element of unpredictability that you're going to see these guys that have been lurking, like Chase Elliott and Joey Logano, that could be poised to pounce on whatever circumstances they're able to benefit from. And, just kind of a gut feeling more than anything based on what we saw last week. But that's kind of been the name of the game with Homestead. I feel like the last couple of years, it's just been such an exciting track where there's been a lot of layers to every race that we've seen there.
Oh no, absolutely. I mean, since we've been watching NASCAR, that's been the case for Homestead. And I mean, case in point is Kyle Larson. You want to say that he can go out and win every single race there, but he's only won once there. And although he has all these laps led, he's also had a lot of things not go his way, whether it's getting into the wall or pit road stuff. Case in point was last year. He came from the back of the field, was running, I think, challenging for the lead actually with Reddick or Blaney. I think it was Blaney actually, and he took himself out. So it's like it's never that always cut and dry, especially this time in the NASCAR Cup Series with the next gen car and with how much parity there is. So yes, it's very easy to say those four favorites can and will get it done, but I mean, yeah, you got to take guys in like Joey Logano and Chase Elliott into consideration. I feel very confidently in at least Elliott and Logano. I think my two sleeper picks in Hamlin and Bowman I have a little bit less confidence in. Speaking on what I mentioned earlier with having 6 drivers you feel really good about, and then a step down. So, yeah, I do think that any of these guys can definitely surprise this weekend for sure.
Talk about surprises. Our value picks have really been popping off. And I mean, look at last week where, who would have thought that Josh Berry and Daniel Suarez were going to finish 1-2? And this is kind of that category of drivers where you're looking at guys who, based on what where Josh Berry and Daniel Suarez's odds were last week, this is kind of the caliber of driver that, the equivalent would have to happen to make some waves at Homestead. I'll kick this one off by starting with Josh Berry because, momentum obviously is a very real thing in the sport, I believe. Plus 4,000 for the race win this week. I think Josh Berry kind of feels like a guy that, like you said, very popular win all throughout the sport. And I think it's because people know how good he is. Everyone knows how good he is. And I think that the floodgates feel like they're going to open up for Berry because the speed is there. We're going to all things considered, a pretty similar track to Vegas in a lot of ways in terms of the how long it is and the way you might race on it. And, the speed has not been an anomaly this year. He led over 50 laps at Atlanta, finished 4th at Phoenix. And by the way, we saw him run very well prior to the season in the duels and in the Clash. So that was, we're seeing little inklings of it back at the start of the season. And it's carried over. He, first, you're talking about a 4th place finish, back-to-back top 5s. And he's starting to look like somebody that we can depend on. And he might not be a value pick for very much longer. So, capitalize on that while you still can. He's only had one other Cup start at Homestead. That's the bad news. The good news is he finished 11th. And that should speak volumes about his talent. Obviously, a late bloomer in his career in this sport. But blooming is exactly what we've seen him do so far. And at 7,700 for daily fantasy, feels like a really strong pick. Like this did not feel like one of those one-off, one-hit wonder kind of wins. This feels like something that is going to be legitimate speed all year based on what we've seen literally from speed weeks to right now. And I don't think it's stopping, especially this week at Homestead. Another driver that's been definitely in that surprise category in terms of the speed that his team and he has shown this year is Carson Hocevar, and he is my second value pick at plus 5,000 for the race win and 7,500 in daily fantasy. So pretty similar in value to Berry, but he's been a contender for top 10s all season long, despite only 2 quality finishes and the near win at Atlanta. He's finished 2nd and 12th, but I think when you look at average running position, he's probably been one of the top drivers in the sport this year. I don't know that for sure, but based off the eye test, I would imagine he's got to be top 10, top 15 in average running position this year. Top 10 in his only other Cup start at Homestead. So a similar showing to Josh Berry, and that's before he's running as well as he is right now. And he won here in his in the Truck Series rather in 2023, 2 years ago. So a couple guys that have shown really good speed this year. That's kind of the common trend with all 6 drivers I mentioned. They've had good speed all year long. And I think there's reason for that. I like to rely on the tangible evidence of what we've seen this year for what we're going to see and how we can possibly benefit and profit off of it this week at Homestead.
Yeah, Hocevar and Berry are 2 great picks. They've been 2 of the best values all season long. And just looking at all four drivers here on that we have listed out, they're all in the $7,000 range, and they're four drivers that I feel very confidently in to insert for daily fantasy, and they're going to have to be guys that you feel good about for daily fantasy as well, because just looking at the lineups here and what they can look like, it's going to be very difficult to get a Kyle Larson or a Tyler Reddick in there without having four of these guys in your lineup. So get familiar with the names, get familiar with the numbers, because I think they're all four great options. And to close it out, my two drivers, I mean, Josh Berry stole the show, obviously, at Las Vegas, but there were two other massive surprises inside the top 10. First one, have a day, Ryan Preece. Ryan Preece plus 6,000 for the race win, $7,200 in daily fantasy, finished third place at Las Vegas, which I'll be honest, I did not expect to see in my entire time watching NASCAR. You look at this guy, how he fared with JTG, with Stuart Haas, he was just not good. Plain and simple, not good. But this season, he has shown speed all 5 races. Finished 15th at Phoenix over 30 laps led at Daytona, at COTA, and 18th at Atlanta. Now, you look at Homestead, he finished 10th there last year and 13th the year prior. So he has, I think, a pretty good floor going into this one, and with momentum on his side. And also, RFK Racing has just looked, I would say, pretty competitive this year, with the exception of Brad Keselowski. Chris Buescher, been one of the most consistent drivers. Ryan Preece has had the speed to back up maybe some not so great results from time to time, but definitely been looking like a more competitive RFK stable at this point through 5 races. And then the other driver that has gotten massively overlooked from Vegas because of guys like Ryan Preece and Josh Berry, AJ Allmendinger, the Dinger, plus 6,000 as well, and an even $7,000 for daily fantasy. He had legitimate speed at Las Vegas. There were a handful of guys that ran top 10 pretty much the entire day, and the Dinger was one of them. And that's evidenced by his average running position of 11th place in that race. And he finished 8th in this race, which marked his best finish of the season. It's also where he placed last year at Homestead. And guess what? Not only was that his best finish in the next gen, but it was his 3rd consecutive finish at at Homestead inside the top 10. He is the only driver that can say that. The only driver to finish top 10 in all 3 next gen races at Homestead. Really impressive number, really impressive stat there. And that's not even a trend. That's just a proven fact that he's going to run well here at Homestead. He is actually tied for the best average finish in the next gen with Christopher Bell at 5.3. So I think that speaks volumes that he's the only driver with top 10s in every single start at Homestead in the next gen, and that he's tied with Christopher Bell for the best average finish in that regard. So playing into the momentum aspect and just proven results to back it up at Homestead in the next gen, Allmendinger is looking like a great pick for daily fantasy. He's actually our cheapest driver in this category, which that's going to make him a lock automatically. And the top 10 props are not up yet on any sports book, but I'm willing to venture out and say it's going to be a lock as well once those go live.
Yeah, I said before when you were talking about AJ Allmendinger at COTA, and I was a little sour on him. You know, he showed great speed in that race, and obviously ran into trouble on the last 5 laps and finished, you know, very low. Not indicative of the speed he had. But I said on our episode that week that it would only take really one showing for me to feel better about him, and I feel like that showing obviously wasn't indicative of how well he ran at COTA, and then he backed it up with another strong run at Vegas. So I'm back in on AJ Allmendinger. And listen, Ryan Preece, if not for Josh Berry and Daniel Suarez, and I know that's a big if, he'd be the guy we're talking about right now. I mean, he is, every time you look up there, like you said, he's just been so consistently good this year. And I didn't peg him as the guy that would carry the torch really for RFK this year, but you could argue it's been him, even with the consistency that Chris Buescher has had. So he's a guy that's definitely on my radar. And this feels like a week, these dozen drivers, it kind of feels like a who's who of power rankings almost. It feels like a tiers of these have been the 4 best drivers. Those are the 4 that we picked as our favorites. Then you look at our sleepers, the guys that haven't won yet that feel like they're knocking on the door. And then these value picks are just guys that have shown speed in all 5 races this year that, you know, if there's going to be another surprise winner, it very well could be them. So that's a dozen that we just talked about. We'll narrow this down to one driver each to get this field of a dozen down to six. I'll run through the names, and I'll let you pick first, Cole, of your three drivers. So we got Larson, Reddick, Bell, and Byron as our favorites. We've got Hamlin, Bowman, Elliott, and Logano as our sleepers, and we've got Priest, Allmendinger, Berry, and Hocevar as our 12 drivers. Who will you take from that field?
I will go against the grain here, pick Tyler Reddick over Kyle Larson. I will go Alex Bowman over Denny Hamlin and AJ Allmendinger over Ryan Preece.
I'm going to take William Byron from the favorites. I will go with Joey Logano from the sleepers. And I will take Josh Berry from the value picks this week. So those are our six, those three, plus Reddick, Bowman, Allmendinger. And as you mentioned, Cole, this is a week where I'm going to be a little bit intrigued by the big money bets, the top 10 bets, which are not posted as of the time that we're recording this. But what we do have right now are some top five, top three odds to look over. And for those of you maybe new to the show, big money bets, just ones you can feel more comfortable throwing a larger bet on, maybe, 3 or 4 times the amount of units you would put on a race winner, if not more. And I like that you led off the show talking a little bit about the Kyle Larson parlay opportunities. But as far as big money bets this week, what do you got your eye on?
Well, to rehash last week, once again, for the third time this season, William Byron to finish top 5 at plus 110 cashed. And I don't know what Vegas's deal is, and I hope they don't catch on, because this has been a theme going back to last year. It seems like every single week, his value for a top 5 prop is plus 110. So you're literally more than doubling your money every time you bet on him to finish top 5. And he's done it 3 times in 5 races this season. That's going to be one that we pick every single week going forward. It's the case this week. William Byron top 5 plus 110. I will also double down on Christopher Bell to finish top 5 at plus 110. Again, he finished top 5 in this race a couple years ago. He's a winner here before, and he's been one of the best all season. Both of them have, Christopher Bell and William Byron. So it's self-explanatory, but I would be very shocked if both these didn't hit, but especially just one for this weekend at Homestead. And again, the top 10 props aren't out just yet, but definitely I'm going to say AJ Allmendinger, top 10, whatever that is. I'm sure it'll be around that plus 110 even payout. Hammer that as well.
Yeah, those feel like sure bets to me. And if there's any others I would throw in, maybe not as high a confidence level, but some of the guys we spoke of, Alex Bowman's plus 275 for a top 5. Josh Berry's had back-to-back top 5s, and he's plus 500. So those aren't what I would call big money bets, but they're definitely something I would like to sprinkle on. I think the odds of Josh Berry finishing top 5 3 weeks in a row are not likely. But listen, we just kind of talked about the reasons why it could happen. And there's been great speed from those 2 drivers I just mentioned. I'll add Joey Logano into that mix too at plus 210 for a top 5. As I said, he hasn't even had a top 10 this year. So that's why you're going to get a little bit of value there. But the speed's been there. He's led the most laps of any driver. And I think those numbers definitely don't lie. So aside from that, Cole, better or worse bets, over-unders, head-to-head driver match bets, anything you've got your eye on this week?
Yeah, so for better or worse over-under bets, the only 2 that I have circled here are William Byron and Christopher Bell's props, naturally. William Byron has to finish inside the top 5 for that to hit, and Christopher Bell has to finish inside the top 6 for that to hit. So you're getting basically a 1-position buffer with Christopher Bell, who's won 3 races this season, as we know. So given their stats at Homestead and how they performed in 2025, these both seem like really good props to predict, and especially that's also doubling down and restating our confidence in William Byron to finish top 5 for the big money bet prop as well. So love those 2. The only other 2 I was looking at were Kyle Larson and Tyler Reddick. Naturally, they both got to finish 4th or better. Larson's prop was 4th, and Reddick's was 4.5. So the Reddick one I was heavily considering that he's had a much better floor than Larson. He's got, again, 4 top 5s and 5 starts in the Cup Series here, so that's a good one. But Larson, again, he's got the 1 win here. Bunch of laps led, but he's had a mixed bag in terms of results. Only 5 top 10s in his 9 starts, or I'm sorry, 5 top 10s in his 11 starts. So bit of a risk associated with that. So I'll lock in Byron and Bell's props of 5.5 and 6.5 respectively. Better than.
And that's on Grid Rival. Looking at head-to-head driver matchups where they have sort of a spread, a positional buffer for certain head-to-head matchups, you got Tyler Reddick to finish within one spot of Kyle Larson. You've got William Byron to finish within one spot ahead of Ryan Blaney. And there's also Alex Bowman to finish at least 3 spots in front of Chase Briscoe. Those are your 3 picks this week. You got them on the outline. What makes you so confident?
Yep. So, not to go too deep into detail here, I like the positional forgivance you have with Reddick and Byron of 1.5. So, if Reddick finishes within 2 positions of Kyle Larson, that hits. And again, I think that Reddick's a safer play and a better play than Kyle Larson, being the reigning winner and having a higher floor with 4 top 5s out of 5 starts in his Cup career here. William Byron's 2 positions over Ryan Blaney. That one's a bit tougher only because Blaney did finish runner-up here last year. You could have very easily made the case that he could have won this race had it been another few laps longer. So I understand the apprehensions there, but just given how Byron's performed this season and his resume at Homestead, I kind of like him over Blaney. And the Bowman over Briscoe, self-explanatory. I know there's 4 spots that Briscoe can finish in between with Bowman, but man, that's just been a team and a driver that's been downright disappointing and abysmal start off their 2025 campaign. So until Briscoe proves us otherwise, if there's a head-to-head, it's probably going to go against him going forward because you look at how Bowman's performed in 2025, 4 top 10s out of 5 starts, one of the most resilient and the best in the series thus far. Chase Briscoe, the complete opposite. So I feel pretty confident in those 3, but especially Reddick over Larson and Bowman over Briscoe.
Well, this is one of those rare weeks, Cole. Depending on the day that we tend to record, we actually do have some DraftKings daily fantasy numbers that we've been discussing throughout the episode. So we can drop some knowledge on you with a DFS recommended lineup. Couple ways that you could decide to go with this. It really depends on sort of which ace driver you'd like and how well-rounded you want your lineup to be. But I think one thing that you and I would agree on, Cole, is that the value picks this week that we had as those 4 drivers, that was Carson Hocevar, Josh Berry, AJ Allmendinger, Ryan Preece, that is, those 4 comprise a very good lineup that leaves you some options for the top 2, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So if you were to include all 4 of those drivers, you could actually fit Tyler Reddick in there, who, again, you could also fit Kyle Larson as well, but I felt more confident in Tyler Reddick. And of course, you could argue that Kyle Larson is a lap leading machine here, but in the event that he doesn't finish top 5 or win, he's probably going to finish outside the top 15. Whereas Tyler Reddick, you're almost a sure thing for a top 10, top 5, and with a shot at the win. So if you wanted to include Berry, Hocevar, Preece, Allmendinger, that's the way to do it, is to fit one of those 2 aces in there. And then you're also getting someone like Chase Elliott with a good floor this season, and someone who's, again, won here, or not won, but finished second here in 2020 as your middleman. But if you wanted to kind of differentiate and not include 4 of our value picks, you can get a little bit creative and swap out Josh Berry for Alex Bowman. Again, not the best resume at Homestead, but he had a career best outing here last time around. He's been great this season, so he could be a good middleman. And then you're left with someone like Christopher Bell as your ace, which is obviously a great compromise for someone who's won here before, finished top 5 here in the next gen. And also the best average in the next gen, tied with Allmendinger at 5.3. So there's a few ways you can go about this, but I think both ways I feel pretty confidently in.
Yeah, and I would just add, there's a lot of directions you could take that as you kind of went through there. I would probably base my tiebreaker off starting position because obviously you're going to gain points for place differential. And if I'm on the fence about a few of those lineups that you mentioned, do I want Tyler Reddick? Do I want Christopher Bell, Alex Bowman, Chase Elliott? I'm going to base it probably off of what I see in practice and in qualifying based on, who we think is going to run up front and who is going to start up front or not start up front. So it's time to put our money where our mouth is, Cole. Take it to the bank here. Let's discuss our winner and sleeper picks this week. Now, my sleeper pick, Daniel Suarez, finished second last week. I also had a sleeper pick earlier this year at the Daytona 500 of Jimmy Johnson when he finished third. So my sleeper picks have been riding high this year. And I think that our winner picks have been solid, but I don't think we've hit on one yet. At least that I'm thinking off the top of my head. I don't think we did, right?
No, we did not have a winner pick hit. I don't think actually. We might have with I mean, we've been pretty.
We've had our favorites that
No, we
have
haven't
won.
actually. We haven't. I'm
Yeah, because
sorry.
we didn't pick Christopher Bell those 3 weeks. We didn't pick William Byron.
Yep.
We certainly didn't pick Josh Berry. So
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, we're still looking for a winner pick. We're kind of due here, and also again, kind of unsure. I think you picked first last week. Am I right
I
on that?
did. I picked Bill. I was between him and Larson, but I couldn't pass up Bill because he
Yep.
won 3 in a row. So yep, that was me.
And I picked Kyle Larson. So I got first pick this week, and I think I'm going to take the driver that you were probably targeting, and that's Tyler Reddick. You convinced me with the quotes you had on him and how comfortable he is at Homestead. And listen, he's been knocking on the door. We've been singing his praises all year. It's been Christopher Bell, it's been William Byron, but it's also been Tyler Reddick. And we've been saying it. We've been making sure people aren't looking past that 45 bunch. And I really think that this is going to be the week for him. It's all been shaping up for him to win any of these first 5 races, really. But I think this is the one, and I'm going to pick Tyler Reddick for the win.
Yeah, awesome pick. I it's the logical option, but I was probably going to go with Kyle Larson anyway, only because he's running triple duty and getting that extra track time, as we've seen, whether it be in dirt or the lower series. It always comes into a factor when Kyle Larson races on Sundays. So I think that's going to play a big factor in this one at Homestead. And I'll go with him for the race win. And I'm going to go with him for a clean sweep. So again, 16-13 for if you're parlaying those for the race win. Really, really good value there. And then for a sleeper, I'm going to roll with the Dinger. He has done nothing but score top 10s here in the next gen. That's when he was not performing at his best these last 3 years, and he's coming off a top 10 here, a convincing top 10 at Las Vegas at that. So I'll take momentum from Vegas and momentum from these prior next-gen starts at Homestead for the Dinger as my sleeper.
Good shot. And I'm going to go with Ryan Preece. Why not? It's been so good this year. So I'll take him as my sleeper. But this will be the Straight Talk Wireless 400 Sunday at 3:05 p.m. Homestead, I mentioned, Cole, one of my personal favorite tracks, especially in this era of racing. And I'm pretty pumped up for this one, especially if what we saw at Vegas is any indicator, because again, so many players, so much strategy, there's just so much that went into the completion of that race. And I think we're going to see it again this week.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And if you look at like last year's race at Homestead, so many comers and goers, just great racing start to finish. It's going to be a fun one. It's going to be a really fun one. And back to the lack of the actual sombrero for this week. So the reason why I didn't purchase one was because it was $20. I was not going to throw away $20 on a sombrero that I was never going to wear again. Instead, here's an idea: throw $20 away on a potential like sleeper or a long shot for the win. If you bet Josh Berry last week, he was plus 10,000 for the race win. So why not throw money on somebody like Carson Hocevar or Ryan Preece for this week instead? I'm not going to do that just out of the ethics aspect of things with the money stop and being a journalist in NASCAR. But that was kind of my logic for not buying an actual sombrero. But all to say, as made evidence by last week, anybody could win on any given weekend, because that was supposed to be a cut and dry track in Homestead or in Vegas. Now you got a more unpredictable track in Homestead. So you never know.
Yeah, this is going to be amazing. Kudos to you for living up to your bet made with me, whether it was a sombrero or not. Maybe this is a sign. Maybe because you wore a cowboy hat, it's going to be Austin Dillon this week. I mean, I don't even think we mentioned Josh Berry last week, right?
We did not mention Josh Berry, and you know what? Austin Dillon, he has actually a pretty solid resume here at Homestead. Believe it was a 12.5 average finish and quite a few starts. He's been in the Cup Series for a while now. So we had him on the outline, I think, last year at Homestead, and he didn't perform well. I think he finished 28th. So there's that. But collectively, he's run well at Homestead. So you might be on something there.
Well, a baker's dozen if you want to include Austin Dillon with our other 12 drivers. You heard it here first. That'll drop the jack this week on the Money Stop, your most important NASCAR betting stop of the day, of the week. Follow us on social media at @the_Money Stop. If you're watching on Twitter, you can visually see what our social media handles are. Cole will have the great updates all week long on his account, on the Money Stop account. But that'll do it. We'll drop the Jap this week. Thanks again, Freak Nation, for tuning in. For all of us Speed Freaks, kicking the tires, everybody in the NASCAR community, we thank you so much for tuning in to the Money Stop. We hope you can make some bank this week, and we will see you next time.